I'm the chair of the session, Nevenka Hrovatin, from the School of Economics and Business, University of Ljubljana. Maybe you met me in Ljubljana in 2019 when we organized the European Energy Conference. So we have 4 presenters today, and I suggest that I shortly introduce each presenter before the start of the session. You have around 20 minutes for the presentation, and then I would allow for 10 minutes of discussion. So we have our first presenter, Douglas Silveira, University of Alberta, Canada. Yes. So you are a postdoc, Mr. Silveira is postdoctoral researcher at Department of Economics, University of Alberta, who is among the 5th best universities in Canada, as I see.
Yeah, I believe so. Yeah.
Yes, but you graduated, as I see, in Brazil. Yes, from the Federal University of Juiz de Fora.
Perfect. That's correct.
Yes, and you are a research associate at Territorial and Sectorial Analysis Laboratory, and also at the Empirical Industrial Organization Group. So you also have good publication records already. Some papers already published in energy economics and some other reputable journals. So the floor is yours now to present your research.
So thanks for your kind introduction. And so hello, everyone. I will start with my presentation. Let me share my screen with you. Just 1 second. So can everybody see my screen?
Yes, that's fine.
Okay, so I will be presenting this paper entitled Strategic Interaction between Wholesale and Electricity, between Wholesale and Ancillary Services Markets. And it's a joint paper written together with David Brown and Andrew Eckert. We are all from the Department of Economics here at the University of Alberta. And so let me start by giving you some of the outline for today. I will start with the motivation of the paper. Then I will go through the theoretical model. I'll discuss a bit of the analytical results deriving from this theoretical model. I will complement the solution of the theoretical model with some empirical analysis as well, where we will use Alberta electricity market here in Canada as a case of study. And then I will finish this presentation with some conclusion and some policy implication regarding our findings. So starting with the big picture of the paper, reliability of electricity markets requires the instantaneous balancing and supply and demand. And the procurement of wholesale electricity market and ancillary services, AS, I will call AS from now on, is vital in achieving such objectives. And one important design feature of both ancillary services market and wholesale electricity market is to know if they clear simultaneously or sequential. As jurisdictions where we have the simultaneous timing, we can mention the US markets. And also we have some other examples of jurisdictions where the market clearing is sequential in the European countries, such as Germany, Spain, France, and Italy. So when it comes to the implications of AS wholesale market competition, the literature has focused largely only on technical aspects of AS markets. And there's little discussion about market power because it's highly concentrated in, this analysis of market power is highly concentrated on wholesale market, and little is discussed about this AS wholesale market competition. So that's one of the main motivations of the paper. And one of the goals and contributions that we aim at providing is based on the model that we create to study the strategic implications of simultaneous versus sequential timing when firms compete in both the ancillary services and wholesale electricity markets. So sequential market clearing has been a very important channel through which firms can employ strategic commitment in other settings or other markets. And our analysis here is evaluating this strategic commitment effect in this multi-market AS and wholesale electricity competition. And as I mentioned before, we employ data from Alberta's electricity market to demonstrate the quantitative implications of our theoretical model. And to summarize some of our findings, we can show that under sequential timing, firms facing increasing marginal cost curves will reduce their AS output and lower marginal costs in the wholesale market. And it is due to this strategic commitment effect that has actually a small impact on the wholesale market outcome, but will largely impact the ancillary services market, where we can actually observe higher market clearing price. And so let me introduce you a bit more of our theoretical model. We are assuming here Cournot competition in wholesale and the AS market. And we start this theoretical model by assuming a duopoly, a Cournot duopoly, and in which AS provision will impact the cost of providing wholesale output, because it will preclude the use of a portion or even all of a generation unit's available capacity in the wholesale market. And this linkage between the output choices will impact the strategic behavior and also the equilibrium outcomes in both the AS and wholesale markets. And in that sense, increased output in one market will increase actually the marginal cost of supply in the other market. Oh, just 1 second. Yeah, okay. One key aspect of our model is our cost function, which has a quadratic form, as you can see here in expression 1. And so it's a function of the quantity provided in the wholesale market, which is denoted by QI, and XI is the quantity provided in the AES market. And these quantities, as I mentioned before, they are linked in this marginal cost. And the intuition of the expression 1 is basically that the greater is the AS output, the greater will be the marginal cost of the wholesale output, and also vice versa. And the magnitude of this connection depends on the cost function parameters, which are given by kappa, and we also have gamma and eta. Eta is taking values between 0 and 1. And the intuition here is that greater values of eta may reflect that it's more likely the electricity will be actually supplied. And eta when it's larger, I mean, it might also be larger if the generation capacity intended for AS production must be made unavailable in the wholesale market, regardless of whether it's physically supplied in the AS market or not. And also greater values of gamma here in this cost function will correspond to a more steeply sloped marginal cost curve. And once we have introduced this cost function, I will explain a bit of the profit function in both the simultaneous and the sequential timing. And as you can see here from expression 2, to calculate the profit function, it's a very standard formulation. So we have the revenues derived from both the wholesale and the AS markets. And as we are considering 2 variations in model timing to reflect the different market design regimes that are used in practice, we will now discuss some of the outcomes, the equilibrium outcomes derived from both the sequential and simultaneous market clearing timing. So when firms choose their output in both markets simultaneously, it corresponds to a regime that is actually called this joint clearing cooptimization approach, which is based on this profit function, as we can see here. And to solve this optimization problem, we're going to use this Nash equilibrium, and it yields the following AS and wholesale quantities for each firm. It's given by expressions 3 and 4 here. And the intuition behind these expressions is that in both equilibrium quantities, the first 2 terms in the numerator, right here, the first 2 terms here and here, it will actually reflect the vertical demand intercept in the associated market and the constant component of the marginal cost. And indeed, in the case where we have that eta is equal to 1 and gamma is equal to 0, these solutions will collapse to the standard Cournot equilibria with linear demand and constant marginal costs. And the third term here in both expressions can be interpreted as follows. So as the demand intercept in the wholesale market captured by this parameter A increases, the firm's output in the wholesale market will increase as well. And this will raise the marginal cost of supply and output into the AS market, which will reduce the firm's quantity in that specific market. And by terms in the sequential market clearing timing, AS quantities are not chosen simultaneously with the wholesale quantities. Now it's chosen before. And this timing allow firms to choose their AS market outputs strategically to influence wholesale market outcomes. And as we can see here from expressions 5 and 6, the equilibrium output in the wholesale market depends on both firms' quantity provided in the AS market. And in this sequential timing model, we have these direct and strategic effects. Let me explain a bit about this first expression here that shows up when we solve the optimization problem in the sequential timing. This is basically the direct effect. And this expression captures the impact of an increase in the AS quantity on firm I's profit, absent any consideration of how AS output will impact the second stage wholesale market equilibrium. We also have in this sequential timing model the so-called strategic effect that will occur through the effect of the AS output, of the effect of my AS output on my rival's wholesale market output in the second stage. So it's captured by this expression here. And as we can see, it will be negative. And increasing firm's AS output will increase its second stage wholesale marginal costs. And wholesale equilibrium output will decrease. And its rival's equilibrium wholesale output increases. And also increasing, we can observe increase in firm I's rival output, which will reduce its profit. And this effect lead firm I to choose lower AS market output. And so to summarize the analytical results that we have presented so far, compared to the simultaneous move game, the sequential move game has lower AS output. So it will offer lower quantities in the AS market. And also we can observe higher wholesale outputs. And to complement this analysis, we can also investigate a bit more of the second stage wholesale output best response functions. And where from this expression, we can see that when we decrease the amount of AS output, it will shift firm I's best response function outward, which indicates it wants to produce more output for an output level chosen by its rival. As an illustration of this situation, we have these best reply functions here, considering both the simultaneous and sequential timing. From this figure here, we can see the points A and B at the intersection. They are actually denoting the equilibrium in both the simultaneous and the sequential move game. And we can see here in this dashed line, the intersection of this dashed line representing the sequential equilibrium output in the wholesale market. It is actually greater than the one that we can observe for the simultaneous timing game. And to complement this theoretical analysis, we also provide some empirical discussion using the Alberta's electricity market as a case of study. And the objective here is to illustrate these quantitative implications of our model in a setting that reflect some key features of real-world electricity markets. And so we use hourly generation unit level data for the year of 2020, starting from January until December. And just to give you some summary statistics of the Alberta electricity market, we can see that there is considerable variation in wholesale demand and prices with high level means, and also there's a significant standard deviation, both in wholesale demand and prices. And AS market, of course, it's smaller than the wholesale market, and the price demanded by firms to supply the AS product is also lower. but it still has some variation, as you can see here. And giving some more information about the functioning of the Alberta wholesale market, it's based on an hourly uniform price procurement auction. Firms compete by submitting up to 7 price quantity offer blocks for each generation unit in the portfolio. And there's a single province-wide wholesale price. It's an energy-only market, and firms will rely solely on revenues from generating electricity, both in wholesale and AS markets, to recover their fixed and variable costs. And it's okay to exercise market power in these markets. It's actually explicitly permitted, and there's no bid mitigation. And in 2020, the electricity market was moderately concentrated, and there was 5 largest firms controlling almost 65% of the province's generation capacity. And the rest of this capacity was offered by a large fringe of very small firms. And the composition of this market is 47% of installed generation was natural gas based. We have coal, we also have some wind, hydro, and a very small amount of biogas and biomass. And let me introduce now some aspects of the ancillary services market in Alberta. So the system operator typically procures 3 types of operating reserves. The traditional ones are regulating, spinning, and supplemental. And we have them in both active and standby forms. Regulating reserves will address small minute-to-minute demand and supply differentials. Spinning and supplemental reserves, together with these contingency reserves, are designed to address large disruptions. And standby operating reserves are called only when active reserves are unable to produce. And it doesn't happen very often. So in 2020, the active AS market was actually highly concentrated. We have this Transelder firm, it's a generator here, which holds the highest percentage of all 3 types of active operating reserves, as we can see here. And we also have other dominant firms in this market. We can call them as NMAX 24%. We have Balancing Pool, and also we have Heartland Generation. So these are the biggest firms that we have, the top firms that we have here in Alberta. And so when we run this theoretical model and apply it to the Alberta context, we increase the number of firms in the model. So we now consider the 4 main firms in this market. And we also consider some other aspects such as must-run capacities. And to run this empirical analysis, we provide results based on symmetric firms when we assume that firms have the same market parameters such as cost functions. And we also provide examples of asymmetric firms, but the conclusion is pretty much the same. We only see variation actually in the magnitude of the outcomes. And in this case here, when we consider eta equal to 1, which serves us as an upper bound on the strategic effect that committing to AS output has on wholesale market outcomes, we can observe that moving from simultaneous to sequential timing, we reduce the average total AS output produced by a bit more than 31%. The average AS prices will increase by 33% on average, and the average total AS procurement costs will increase by almost 33%. And these are being represented here in this line here. We have the effects of the AS market, and as we can see here in this panel B, the effects are very small in the wholesale market. That's what it's showing right here. And let me discuss about this. So the change in market timing can actually have a large impact on AS market outcomes. That's what our empirical and theoretical findings are telling us. And we can see also small changes in AS output, and it has a substantial impact on the market clearing price and total procurement costs in the AS market. It comes from the strategic effect that we observe in the sequential timing. And these larger changes are facilitated by the highly inelastic residual demand function in the AS market. And also the effects of sequential timing on wholesale quantities and prices are small, both in absolute and percentage terms. And we attribute this smaller wholesale market effects it's probably are driven in part by the more elastic fringe supply function that we can observe in wholesale markets. So this is my last slide. And just to offer you some conclusions and policy implications, there's a strategic and incentive which arises in the setting where the AS market clears prior to the wholesale market, and firms will reduce their AS output in this setting because it allows them to commit to competing more aggressively in the subsequent wholesale market. And this strategic incentive leads to a higher AS market clearing price, but it will put downward pressure on the wholesale price. Were policymakers to consider the AS market independently, the larger percentage increase in AS procurement costs might lead to policy changes that are less justified when considering the total effect across both markets. So thank you for your time.
Thank you very much. Do we have any comments, questions? No? So may I just ask you what would then be the policy suggestions for policymakers based on your paper?
Well, basically, we are trying to shed some light on this discussion that we must look for both markets, because strategic commitment in one market can lead to exercise of market power in other market. And it actually can decrease competition in one side, and also can increase prices to the final consumers. So basically, this is the kind of policy discussions that we can discuss in this framework.
Mm-hmm. Because as I can see, you conclude that the effect is really ambiguous, moving from simultaneous to sequential markets. Yes?
Yeah. Because, and again, there's different settings all over the world in terms of the sequential time. In some countries, I think that Italy, I'm not sure, but I think that the AS market clears after the wholesale market. And in some other countries, as in Canada, the AS market clears first. And so the level of concentration in these markets can actually lead to ambiguous answers. So,
and maybe one quick question. Do you think that this high concentration in the wholesale and also AS market, that it really leads to higher prices? Do you think there is any market abuse or whatever?
I wouldn't say it's a rule, but at least it's what we can derive from, a simplified kernel model as we are using. And we found some empirical evidences of such impact in Alberta as well, where we have this concentration. And of course, if we gonna use this game approach to understand these markets, we can see that this strategic effect, when it arises, it can, of course, lead to, it actually can allow firms to exercise more market power.
Thank you. So due to the time constraints, I would suggest that we move to the second presenter. So we have the paper co-authored by Natalia Naval and Mr. Jose Yusta. I've only got the CV of Mr. Yusta, not of the presenter. So please, Natalia, would you please share, would you please introduce yourself for the audience shortly? Yes, because I haven't received your CV from the
okay.
Just shortly.
Okay. I work at the electrical engineering in the University of Zaragoza, Spain, with Jose Maria Yusta. My research lines are electricity market, optimal techno-economic dispatch, renewable virtual power plants, and vulnerability and of infrastructure between gas and electricity system. And I did a stay in Mexico and during 3 months, and basically it's a sort abstract for me.
Okay, thank you. So you are now in Mexico, yeah, presenting for us. Yeah, so please, the time is yours. Probably not the best time for you now. Please start with your presentation.
Okay. I hear a little bad. I think I have a little problem internet connection, but I hope to present correct.
Yeah, I think we hear you quite well, so it's fine.
Okay. I'm sharing my screen. Can you see it?
Yes, that's fine.
Okay. Well, first, good morning, everyone. I'm presenting robustness analysis of power system with a high share of renewables. This presentation consists of a first part where I explain the main motivation of this research with the main objectives. Then I define the method and the case study along with the result obtained. And finally, I summarize the main conclusion. Well, the pro-renewable energy mentality is being imposed in the transformation of the electricity generation mix in most developed countries in order to accelerate the energy transition towards an emission-free future. The massive installation of new wind and photovoltaic generation plants means facing the intermittency in the availability of electrical energy to meet global electricity consumption. Well, to alleviate this imbalance, complementary infrastructure is necessary to supply the rest of the demand when renewable generation is not enough. Therefore, gas-fired power plants have emerged as a backup technology for the power system. This highlights a growing interdependence between the gas and electricity system. Therefore, the behavior of one may have adverse effect on the other. Therefore, the main objective of this research is to evaluate the behavior of power system with different levels of renewable energy share and their contingencies in the electrical grid. Well, a previous paper studied the influence of the renewable energy on the robustness in the electricity system, but our contribution additionally analyzed the interdependence between the electricity and gas systems. The assessment of the robustness of electricity system with integration of renewable generation must consider the interaction between gas and electricity transmission network. We use the software saying that this means a scenario analysis interface for energy system. It is an energy infrastructure modeling tool that unifies electricity and gas system models, which make it exclusive. This tool is based on the mathematical formulation of model for electrical network with a quasi-dynamic behavior, for gas network with a time evolution of the fluid condition in the pipeline, and finally includes a formulation to represent the interconnection between both systems. This analysis is applied to a case study of Belgium. Since general data are available, such as generation, electricity and gas consumption, and technical constraints of each system component. The study is carried out during the 24 hours of a critical day for electricity demand and gas consumption with low generation. Due to the big cold wave during the study day, the Belgian electricity system suffered several contingencies, like the freezing of wind turbines, failure in the gas supply to gas-fired power plants, and failure of several transmission lines. We analyzed 4 cases. Case 1 and 2 are the base case, and case 1 without contingencies, and 2 with contingencies. On the other hand, case 3 and case 4 are cases with higher share of renewables. Case 3 without contingencies, and 4 with contingencies. In cases 3 and 4, renewable energy represent 38% of the electricity generation mix, compared to 21% in cases 1 and 2. We can see the result obtained. More important, from the results of the simulation of the electrical system, on the one hand, we obtain the hourly electricity could not be supplied in the network demand basis has obtained. Similarly, the evolution the gas not supply in the consumption nodes of the gas network is also obtained. Case 2 present an increase of 14% of the electricity not supplied regarding case 1 due to several simultaneous contingencies occur. For example, line outages and generation shutdowns. In addition, in this case, the contingencies in the grid have a more significant effect on the gas system by affecting buses that fed compressor stations, causing a lack of gas supply. In the cases with a higher share of renewable generation, there have been significant changes. On the one hand, case 3 reduced average gas consumption because of the renewables contribution, which has an impact on the fluid stored in the network's gas pipelines by 2% compared to case 1. On the other hand, case 4 increases the electricity not supplied due to the lack of generation access to alleviate the imbalances derived from the simulated events. And finally, it should be known that as renewable generation increases in the grid, more critical problems appear in the supply, because variability in generation defines the system performance. Finally, the main conclusion of this research are the following. A future with 100% of renewable generation is not possible with today's technology, and robust energy infrastructure must remain in place while the energy transition is successfully complete. And The third point, the objective of energy transition cannot be achieved without energy storage to back up the intermittency of renewable generation. For example, is very necessary large-scale electrical batteries and hydroelectric pumping, among others. Therefore, gas systems still have an important role to play in the coming years. The continuity of this type of analysis is necessary in the context of the current energy transition to reduce dependence on fossil fuels. As further research, we can analyze the role of subway gas storage in the management of long-term supply crisis caused by cold waves or inability of access of both systems. And another line of study, we can incorporate hydrogen gas produced from electricity into the networks, with good increase the dependence between gas and electricity network, but this would facilitate greater flexibility in the joint management of energy resources. And thank you for your attention, and I am at your disposal for any question or suggestion.
Thank you very much. And I would again leave some room for some quick questions.
Yes, I have a small comment. Thank you for presenting a Belgian case in a very cold winter day. So it's very relevant, the base case that you are presenting. But I have a small comment because we are in a very interconnected electricity market in Europe. So I think before this energy crisis and before the nuclear problems in France, usually Belgium can import electricity from France to the Belgian system. I think that's one aspect to take into account. And for the future work, probably also the base case in a very, maybe it can be a worst case scenario too, because today it's like still -6 degrees in my computer, and it's a very low wind. And maybe the renewable electricity generation share is lower if you have a little wind. So, but thank you for your interesting research.
Thank you very much for this comment. Natalia, any feedback from you to this comment?
I hear very bad.
You don't hear us well. Okay.
If you send me an email address,
okay, that's fine. So maybe at the end, if we have some time, and maybe I'll try to send you through chat the question. Okay. So, but let us now continue with other presenters, not to end up with insufficient time for everybody. So let us move to our third presenter. Associate Professor François Benhmad. I'm not sure if I pronounce it correctly.
Yes.
Yeah, from the University of Montpellier in Faculty of Economics in France. And Professor Benhmad is a specialist in finance, energy, and econometrics, as I understand. Yes. And it also has a very impressive publication record, I must say, together with the co-author also, Professor
Jacques.
Yeah, so I'm not very good in pronouncing that. Thank you. So the floor is yours, please.
Okay, thank you so much. My presentation will analyze the impact of nuclear power generation on the electricity spot price, especially in France. So the beginning or the motivation of our research is based upon the price of wholesale electricity in France that surged to reach more than 1,000 euro per megawatt hour in 2020, in August the 26th. It's about 12 times more than 2021 prices, which were around 85 euro per megawatt hour. This skyrocketing price is due in part to problem with gas supply to Europe induced by Russian invasion of Ukraine, but also in France, especially in France, to less nuclear power generation. So here I show the share of gross electricity generation in France before the 2020 COVID problem. We see that the electricity is mostly and mainly produced by nuclear energy. About 70% of power mix in France comes from nuclear plants, and the renewables constitute a portion about 20%, and the remaining comes from natural gas mainly, and also from some coal stations. So France as a country getting around 70% of its electricity from its own nuclear power stations. The problem of skyrocketing price electricity could be quite different, because now half of 56 reactors are online. Just half of 56 reactors are online before the winter season, because the majority of them are closed for maintenance reason or for corrosion issue, and especially there is 12 reactors that are still online because of this corrosion issue. So research question consists on assessing the impacts of nuclear power generation electricity spot price, and to answer the following question: to what extent the surge in price of wholesale electricity in France can be explained by less nuclear power generation and by higher price of natural gas? So to answer this question, we will carry out an empirical analysis, and we will take data from 1st January 2021 to 30 September 2022. This data is mainly composed by daily nuclear power generation, daily wind and photovoltaic generation as renewables, daily demand, and daily future natural gas price. So our empirical model question consists on an estimate of this model, where we will assess the same and the magnitude of this coefficients of load, nuclear, solar, wind, and especially for natural gas. And we remember that the spot electricity price was mainly around 42 euro per megawatt hour. Even if we have this spike, but it's just for 1 or 2 days when it exceeds 800 euro per megawatt hour, but mainly the price was quite low, and we continue with this low price till the third quarter of 2020, when we have this high increase of electricity price, and then another wave of price increases in 2022, and this increase of spot price, electricity spot price, follows the increase of natural gas. And here we have the first peak when the natural gas from Dutch TTF reached about 120 euro per megawatt hour, and the second peak was reached in third quarter about of 2022 about 300 euro per megawatt hour. So it is an historical level of skyrocketing price of natural gas. But at the same time, as we see here in this this figure, we have a progressively decreasing of nuclear production in France through these technical issues, and mainly in 2022 there is a strong decrease, an historical decrease of nuclear production in France to this corrosion issues, as I mentioned before. So here in this figure, we see that there is a strong correlation between spot electricity price in blue color and natural gas price in red color. That means that there is a strong impact of natural gas on electricity spot price in France, but we carry out an estimate, and here are the results. So at the beginning we will take all the sample, and the second time we will analyze two subsample. The first one consists just in analyzing this relationship during 2021. And the second subsample we will analyze just in 2022, and I will summarize to get more time for discussion. So let's more time for discussion. I summarize my results here. Though here we see that there is the correlation coefficients are negative during 3 sub period, and the natural gas has a positive coefficients. That means that when we decrease of nuclear generation, will increase the spot electricity price, and at the same time the increase of natural gas will have a positive impact in electricity spot price. And here I will give the analysis of these coefficients to assess the impacts. That means that during all our sample, 1 gigawatt of nuclear less generated from nuclear plants can induce an increase of spot electricity price about 5.5 euro per megawatt hour. This impact is less important. There is 2021 because the problem wasn't exacerbated in 2021. However, in 2022, each gigawatt of decrease in nuclear production could induce an increase of spot price about 14 euro per megawatt hour. So imagine if we have, for example, 10 plants offline, it means that the increase could reach maybe 140 euros per megawatt hour. So that could explain the high level reached by spot price in France. At the same time, for natural gas, each increase of euro per megawatt hour can increase about between 1.8 and 1.7. So globally, it is the same level. That means that each euro in increase of natural gas will have a multiplier effect about in a factor of 1.7 or 1.8 on electricity price. What are the policy implications of that? First of all, there is an urgent need of massive investments in electricity generation capacity, not only in France, but all over European Union. Second, not only we should invest in nuclear power, which will take longer to build, we should invest in renewable because it can be about on stream quickly. There is a need to return to long-term gas supply contracts, avoiding the volatility of natural gas spot price, and giving preferences to exporters without geopolitical risks like Russia. That means that we should diversify our supply sources. We need also to think about the wholesale electricity market design all over Europe, because the merit order based on short-term marginal costs is bound to disappear with this massive deployments of renewables and of nuclear power, because these two types of energy have low or even zero marginal cost, which means that the auction mechanism must be rotated, and the alternative will consist on a merit order based on average costs managed by a single buyer, like who would sign long-term supply contracts with producers selected at the end of the calls for tender. So it should be explored. The central role of the wholesale power market should be maintained, and the disadvantage of price volatility could be limited by, for example, some instrument like contract for difference or like over-the-counter contracts, which would mean that the wholesale markets would only have a supporting role. And one thing, the most important policy recommendation of our people, we are in need of more regulation, but less of markets, because markets give the wrong signal for investments and for price formation in power markets all over Europe, and we are on need to avoid electricity spot volatility. And indeed, we should invest, and but the signal of investments didn't come from markets; it will come from regulation. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. I would open the floor for the audience to present the comments, questions. So then I would maybe comment. So this seem to be very challenging ideas and proposals for ACER, for the Agency of Cooperation of Energy Regulators in Europe, because they're still insisting on this marginal cost principle, in determining the wholesale market price. Do you think that what you are proposing would also be useful and appropriate for countries that have different generation mix than France? Because you really rely on nuclear power, that produces more than 70% of electricity. And as I can see, you probably rely also on renewables in the future. You will need to increase also the share of renewables. But other countries in Europe, and if you take Germany, for example, they are really against nuclear power plants. So do you think that this is a universal proposal for all European countries, or is it more, appropriate for France?
Yes, I wish to say something about this point. Of course, the electricity mix is very different from one country to another. You have countries in which where the part of electricity produced by power station with high proportion of fixed cost as renewables or nuclear. And in the other countries, you may observe that you have electricity production with a high proportion of variable cost, as fossil fuels, gas and coal, for instance. For these reasons, it's difficult to consider that the same system may be implemented everywhere. In fact, today we have to propose reforms to drop the price of electricity on the wholesale market. For instance, to subsidize natural gas, as in Spain or in Portugal. And in the same time, you have to implement a new system. And for the new system for the future, the difficulty was to harmonize the different solutions, because you have interconnections, but the political choice is different from one country to another. And for some countries, nuclear is forbidden. For these reasons, if you are system with only renewables or system with only fossil fuels, the solution is not the same. Of course, the possibility to develop interconnection will lead to implement convergence of wholesale prices, but it's not sure. Is the reason why it's difficult to implement the same system, because each country is in charge of its choice concerning the electricity mix.
Yeah, but if I may comment, this would be really challenging because Acer is still insisting on this electricity target model that should be universal for the European Union, yeah, and the Energy Union. So it's really quite an interesting question. And may I ask you, if I may take this opportunity and ask you, do you think that these technical issues regarding nuclear power in France, could they have been avoided? Or what is your opinion? Was it really just a technical issue and some faults that, you know, or could it be anticipated and somehow prevented?
I will be honest with you. Due to ecological movements and the Green Party movement pressure in France, there was a disinvestment and a less interest from governments coming from the left side in France. So there was a program for diminishing the nuclear capacity in France, though there was a need of an investment about 100 billion euro to allow nuclear plants to continue generating electricity in France. But progressively, pressure coming from the green movements, I am not against them, but I just say the truth.
Yes, of course. Yeah.
Okay, we will lower the nuclear capacity in generating electricity in France from 70% to 50%. So we should shut down some nuclear plants, and we shut Fessenheim nuclear plants. There is 2 nuclear plants there, but the paradox is it comes from Germany. Now Germany, the green minister are advocating for not decommissioning the 2 remaining nuclear plants in Germany. And I will tell you something. The 2 central plants of Germany, sometimes they produce more than an installed capacity of renewables, about 135 gigawatt of installed capacity. The 2 remaining nuclear station produce more this due to intermittency. So it's a political issue. It's not an economic issue. And now all the French parties are convinced that we should put more money in nuclear, not to increase capacities, but just to let the capacity come back online, and to help French citizens and French industrial sector to get electricity, because we are at risk of some blackouts in France.
Yeah, so I read a few months ago that also your president Macron is supporting nuclear very much now, and in reindustrialization plan of France, nuclear should play a very big role, as I understand.
We hope so.
And also this small nuclear modular power plants now, yeah, the new generation. Okay, and maybe just one quick question, because I think we still have enough time. We have only one presenter. What is your anticipation about electricity prices in France in the future, when nuclear power plants will generate electricity normally? Yeah. Do you think you will have lower prices than in the rest of the Europe? Or do you think that these interconnections and, you know, also profit maximization of energy companies, yeah, profit incentive of energy companies will drive prices up, and they will be similar than in other countries? So do you have any thoughts about this?
Until now, we observe a price higher in France than in Germany or in the rest of Europe, except Spain and Portugal, because you have a risk premium this risk premium is due to lack of nuclear electricity. But if during the next months, the production of nuclear energy will be higher, theoretically, it will be the case. We may consider that the lack of nuclear production will be a surprise. And for this reason, we may anticipate that the price of electricity will be lower in France, but not before next March, in my opinion. Because for this winter, the situation is very, very difficult. Even the nuclear power plants are working. New reactor will be connected in the near future, but it will be not sufficient to have very low prices in France.
Okay. And do you have some supports for or price caps for the industry now for electricity prices, retail prices for business?
For domestic sector, yes. For business sector, it's more difficult. The government consider that it's necessary to help industry, but the problem is to drop the price of electricity. For this reason, the French government, in my opinion, prefers the solution implemented in Spain and Portugal, that is to subsidize gas used by power stations, because you may observe that today, for instance, the price in Spain or in Portugal is only 150. In France, in Germany today at 5 p.m., it will be 500 euro per megawatt hour.
Yes.
It is a good solution.
Yeah. Okay, thank you very much for your views, interesting views. And we will move to our last presenter, Diyun Huang from the University of Louvain. There was another participant supposed to present in this session, so I haven't got any CV. Diyun Huang from you. So could you please briefly introduce yourself?
Hello. Yes, I'm Diyun. I'm from University of Leuven, from Electric Department. I'm now finishing my PhD on the topic of future governance for the European electricity market and interconnection investment. So these are the two central research lines. My co-author is Professor Geert de Koning, the head of Electric Department. I'm the presenter for today.
Thank you very much. So yes, please start with your presentation.
Hi, everyone. The paper that I present today is coupling European long-term electricity market with joint energy and transmission right auction. Essentially, we're doing the comparison between its implementation in nodal pricing and in zonal pricing. Now, amidst the worst energy crisis, having a long-term European electricity market with hedging instruments is gaining increasing importance. Here in this paper, we suggest to use the joint energy and transmission right auction proposed by O'Neill and other authors, because it has several very desirable characteristics. First, it supports the bilateral contract combined with transmission right. For instance, if you are industry that signs cross-border PPA, you can come to the auction to acquire transmission right, or the standardized contract in wholesale markets, such as the day-ahead market today, that implicitly includes transmission access. The second characteristic is that it supports both financial transmission right and physical transmission rights to hedge against congestion costs. And the third is it connects different market time frame by a multi-settlement system. So essentially, it's intertemporal market design. And there is a very interesting feature for this model because all the auction clearing results are liquidated after each round, which means at least prior to real time. So the dispatch results are only financial, and there is no physical usage of the transmission capacity that's implied by this dispatch. So at real time, the system operator can still optimize the network capacity with the real time condition. And so the kind of problem, the European priority interconnection access, which is physical, that's implemented prior to liberalization, and suffered from the anti-competitive effect. This will not be a problem anymore under JETRA. So, and by long term, we actually refer 1 year or several years prior to delivery. So my research question is, with JETRA implemented in long-term market, will today's flow-based zonal market design in Europe deliver the same economic benefits or performance in comparison with nodal pricing? And to assess that, we have several indicators. First, we want to assess whether the market is functioning efficiently. First, we look at revenue adequacy for system operator. This is whether the net payment by generation and load is sufficient to pay the auction bid winners. And this is very important for the cross-border cooperation, because when the market mechanism works, then you don't have to use administratively negotiate rules and to allocate additional costs to different stakeholders in different countries. And second, it's generation demand shift key. I will come back to this definition later. However, it gives us an idea whether an optimal dispatch is achieved. And third, we look at the hedging instrument, whether it's effective for the users. Then we take a look at the total cost for the demand user in the case study. So we come to a JETRA model formulation. So it's a model that maximizes the bid values subject to flow constraint and subject to energy balance. But it's very important, one thing to notice that the beta is the PDDF matrix for each bid in the flow constraint. The T's here are the transmission right, and T1 financial transmission right, and then T2 physical transmission right. G is the energy bids for purchase or sell, but then we'll come to a small example soon. Then we come to take a look at the institutions and the market mechanism under the nodal implementation. So there is a system operator responsible for both market and network operation in all time frames. And a nodal network representation is used in the grid model in all time frames too. And there is always revenue adequacy achieved for the system operator under the conditions listed by the authors. And as we just mentioned before, the market prior to real time are financial. Only real time market is physical. And then we take a look at this multi-settlement rule. Then if a market player bids in the long-term market and gets 100 megawatt hour of FTR at the price of €5 per megawatt hour for the designated node pairs. If then it comes to the day-ahead market, if the day-ahead market price is €10, this market player will get €1,000 back because he gets the day-ahead price. So he can use this money to still buy 100 megawatts of FTR. That's why he can just contain the initial right quantity all the way till real time to hedge against a real-time congestion cost. And we have constructed a case study to illustrate how it works. It's a case study with 4 node 5 lines with equal impedance, with 2 lines have limited capacity. When we are implementing it in the zonal pricing, node 1 is zone west, rest are zone east. And in the zonal pricing, we only take into account this interconnection constraint. And then there are 5 bidders bidding for financial transmission right, physical transmission right, and energy. So I come to explain the PDDF for different bids. For example, with bid 1, who bids for financial transmission right from node 1 to node 3, this very clearly indicate the injection point for energy transaction comes from node 1, and withdrawal point is at node 3. So PDDF that calculate the flow distribution of the energy transaction per unit energy transaction. Now you can calculate on each network element. When it comes to energy bid, however, like the bid 3, who is here, and to specify only the injection node, then implicitly the system assumes withdrawal node other is a hub node. We define node 3 to be the hub. So then we calculate the PDDF for the energy transaction per unit energy transaction from node 4 to node 3. Then you can try use all the information with grid model and bidding information to clear the auction. And then we try to now come to the zonal market. And the zonal market already have institutions that are designed by the day-ahead market coupling. So in long-term auction, we also inherit that pattern with TSOs and power exchange interact with each other. Prior to the market is the TSO who compute grid model with the main parameters. Then in D-1, power exchange accept bid and use the grid model and bid to clear market. Afterwards, the TSO will assess the grid feasibility and perform redispatch if needed. When it's the TSO who have access to the resources only in its control area, we call that a national redispatch in this research. When the TSOs have access to the systems all over, then and can optimize the whole system, and then we call that cross-border or integrated redispatch. But keep in mind there is no hedging opportunity for even in JETRA market players, because this market redispatch is closed for market players. And what's very important that we also inherited from today's market design is the day-ahead auctioning here is physical. So it's kind of equivalent to the real-time market under the nodal pricing. Then give a short explainer to the flow-based market coupling that's used today for the day-ahead market that promote cross-border trade and with an objective to maximize social welfare. We're trying to respect Semi-Kirchhoff's law with the flow calculation. It does it by segmenting the flow approximation with 2 parts. First is the base case. But base case is a system snapshot chosen by the TSOs as the best estimate for operating day. And then you have a flow associated, a reference flow with the base case. The second part is that in order to fill the gap between the real operating point and the base case, the TSOs assume a set of generators with their designated rule with the predetermined share of output contribution at each node to fill the gap. So this is what GDSK is, the nodal change of generation or demand level in proportion to the zonal net injection withdrawal change. And then you can calculate what is still the remaining capacity for this amount of transaction to fill the gap. And we have the equation here. So now we come to talk about the compatibility issue between JETRA and the flow-based methodology. First, because it is as we just see from the beta PDDF calculation, it has very high requirement on the information needed, what type of bid it is, and its volume, and also the injection and withdrawal point. So it's to start with, it's already very difficult to forecast generation load profile in the long term, several years before the delivery. So it's not applicable to take a operating day to day and to represent 3 years later. And second, there's a structure issue, because now you have energy purchase bids and the kind of FTR to back bilateral contract, but the FTR in the zonal market only have the zonal information with injection and withdrawal point. So assume that the TSO have an idea where this energy purchase bid locate. If we observe in our network that the main load center today, like node 3, have only half of the energy purchase bids in the long-term auction, and the last round of long-term auction that happens maybe weeks before. What does that mean? It does not represent the load level several years ahead. It could be that node 3 plans to sign bilateral contract and to acquire FTR later, or it's a billing strategy to combine the long-term and day ahead, or it can be a planned load shift indeed, with investment in local generation or moving load elsewhere. So here our conclusion is the base case in the flow-based market coupling is not applicable. So we only use intra-zonal transaction and take into its flow on the interconnection. And in zonal pricing, one methodological dilemma is that the grid model is made prior to market opening. So there is the information asymmetry between system operator and market player. And then it's impossible to predict the different PDDF set per bid. So here, to simplify, we use a one interzonal PDDF to represent the combined effect of cross-border energy and FTR. But to make the cross-border FTR effective hedging instrument, here we require the FTR to be firm. Otherwise, the market players who hold FTR from long-term auction will need to pay for redispatch, or they face curtailment. Then their bilateral contract can collapse. But to ensure the cross-border FTR firmness, take into account all the uncertainties we just talked about and the methodological issues, then we have to make a grid model very conservative to make the interconnection flow feasible. And we make our generation demand shift key rules in the import region, and to achieve that objective. First, we identify with the generators, it should be dispatchable. That's just to follow the convention of today's flow-based market coupling. And second, very importantly, we give higher weight to generation to the node with generation decrease or demand increase that can represent a critical energy transaction pattern for interconnection line. So here, for example, in the long-term auction model, in the zone east is our energy import zone, and among all the nodes in zone east, node 2 will, if node 2 becomes withdrawal node, it will represent the most critical energy transaction pattern for the interconnection line 1-2, because the PDDF from energy transaction between node 1 and 2 is the highest on the interconnection line 1-2. So we can also apply a higher reliability margin for long-term auction to reflect uncertainty, and then we can clear the zonal market in the longer term. And then it comes to the day-ahead market. As we said before, it is now a physical market, so we have to take into account some of the constraints in a real-time market for nodal pricing. The JETRA model made the bilateral contract binding in real time by putting lower and higher bound the same for FTR. Here we don't have the exact location of the bilateral FTR injection withdrawing point, and we also don't have the kind of nodal representation in the zonal model. So we have to make the bilateral contract binding by putting a bit more conservative grid model again. So we follow the similar rules we just made for the long term, and we have followed the convention to use one interzonal beta and to be consistent with long-term auction. And the JETRA require the grid parameter in day-ahead market to be a little bit more relaxed. So we also follow that. Now it comes to our results in the long-term auction, because we only have with interzonal trade only have FTR accepted, then we can observe that in nodal pricing there is significant higher amount of cross-border FTR compared with the zonal pricing quantity. And now we come to the GDSK again, because with the hindsight, with all the information, you have the nodal pricing dispatch that represent optimal dispatch result. So if you have the long-term auction nodal pricing dispatch and compare that with the base case in long-term grid modeling, then we can try to calculate what could be the optimal GDSK, and we compared with the ex-ante GDSK we just used. And also, if you have the optimal GDSK, you can have an optimal PDDF. So you can try to calculate again what could be the potential optimal interzonal transaction. So this value is between the nodal pricing cross-border trade and the zonal pricing cross-border trade. And we can observe a similar result in the day-ahead market. And then when it comes to the real-time market and redispatch comparison, we notice that the revenue adequacy for system operator and the nodal pricing is achieved, but there is no revenue adequacy kept for system operator on the zonal pricing after redispatch, because after the day-ahead market, the system operator have a small amount left, but both national based and integrated cross-border redispatch will cost more than that small amount. So the system operator still needs to allocate this amount, this additional money with administratively made rules. Similarly, we can do that calculation to compare the optimal GDSK with the GDSK that we can obtain with a dispatch pattern from national and cross-border redispatch. Very interestingly, with an integrated redispatch where TSO have access to resources over the system, the dispatch result is the same as the nodal pricing. So that's why this matrix here is the same as the optimal GDSK. And we also want to assess whether hedging work effectively in the end now. So as we only have one demand who acquire energy purchase bid, but also is a withdrawal point for the FTR, we can calculate accumulated cost for this demand with energy purchase bid cost and the FTR bid across all time frames and add them together. So we can see that on the nodal pricing and cross-border redispatch, the results are similar, but on the national redispatch, the cost is much higher. So now we can conclude the implementation of JETRA under nodal pricing is operated by the ISO that simultaneously optimize market and network operation. And when we implemented in a zonal market with TSO and power exchange interaction, then there is an information asymmetry for the system operator when it makes grid modeling. So our result from system operation perspective is that on the zonal pricing, there is less cross-border trade potential, as we said, due to this information asymmetry. And this methodological inefficiency will be amplified given the long-term uncertainty. And third, because of the firmness of FTR requirement and the bindingness of the bilateral contract for day-ahead, and the grid modeling is much more challenging. You can see it on the other way, because the flow-based market coupling represent a kind of selected generation set with a predetermined contribution share. However, FTR is a free choice of market players. The quantity, especially the injection and withdrawal point, are very important information, and then it cannot be easily represented by the predetermined GDSK. And then the price consistency between long-term and day-ahead market is kept still for under zonal pricing. However, after redispatch, there's no revenue adequacy. And from a market player perspective, in general, the hedging capability under zonal pricing is weakened compared with that of nodal pricing, unless you have a integrated redispatch. But we analyzed, like, it's not very likely given the political constraint. And then it's observable much less cross-border FTRs available, and especially on the long-term market. And the contracts from the joint auction cannot be used to hedge against the redispatch costs that also contribute the higher costs on the zone pricing. So to conclude, in order to implement JETRA effectively in the European long-term electricity market, reforming the zonal pricing into nodal pricing will be the prerequisite. Thank you. It's the end of presentation.
Thank you very much for this interesting presentation. I think that the European Union ACER is really has really problems even with the zonal pricing redesign or redesigning the bidding zones so that they don't overlap with only political borders. So I can imagine that introducing this nodal pricing would really be a challenge. So what do you think? Can you think about practical perspectives of introducing nodal pricing in the European system?
Yes, I can imagine that changing into nodal pricing will mean to merge the network and market operation. It has huge institutional implication. Politically, it's very challenging, but I also don't see that changing into smaller bidding zone is a very long-term solution, because also the billing zone borders will need to be adapted all the time. And we chose this small case study to include just one line in zone east that has a small congestion. And so this could also still happen even you change to the small bidding zone with limited congestion. So then why not just first try to find the best and just go directly to the best solution that can enable also the long-term market with introduction of FTR as desirable. So thank you for the question.
Thank you very much. And because we are coming to the end, I will just leave the floor to our speaker, Natalia Naval. Natalia, are you with us? If you want to reflect to that comment. Natalia probably doesn't hear me.
Excuse me, we have 1 minute left. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. So Natalia, I just sent her the message through the chat, but so she said, we evaluated the critical day with simultaneous transmission line outages, generation facilities failures. We want to bring the study system to maximum stress. So that were her response about the interconnection capacities. But we don't have enough time for further discussion. Thank you for this wonderful presentation, very challenging presentation that give us a lot of food for thought for the future for electricity market design and also electricity mix and other issues. Thank you very much. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.